Pleasure Trap. What inspired you to want to write this book? I mean, obviously it's done very well. I'm looking at the reviews. What inspired you to want to write this book?
Well, we'd been in practice a long time before we started writing The Pleasure Trap. And the idea was to try to explain how it was these patients that we were seeing get well were actually getting well, trying to come up with an explanation that made sense, that was consistent with our experience and the facts as we could determine them. And so, in our mind, the pleasure trap, that is the artificial stimulation of dopamine in your brain, that dopamine is what's associated with pleasure. The more dopamine, the more pleasure. The more dopamine, the better the food tastes, the better the experience is perceived. The reason why your brain gives you dopamine is to reinforce behaviors that favor survival and reproduction. So it's not surprising that the only natural normal stimulants of dopamine are food and sex. Food and sex are the only natural, normal, intense stimulants of dopamine, as you'd expect, because if you didn't engage in enough feeding behavior, you wouldn't survive. If you didn't engage in enough sexual behavior, you wouldn't survive. And so it's logical that the brain would reward the body by engaging in these positive behaviors. The problem was humans got really clever, and we learned to short circuit this very natural system with the use of certain chemicals. And one of the most obvious are drugs: alcohol, cocaine, methamphetamines. These chemicals all stimulate dopamine production and make people feel good. The problem is it's an unnatural stimulation, and so it can lead to addiction. I mean, that's the hallmark of addiction, where you're having to do something to continue, not only to feel good, but to avoid feeling very bad, the withdrawal effect. And the same thing happens when you add these chemicals into the diet. They taste really good. They make foods taste good because they result in dopamine stimulation in the brain, just like drugs do. But it's an artificial stimulation, and you can literally develop an addiction, if you will, to the artificial stimulation of these chemicals. And now you have to keep eating these chemicals to avoid feeling very bad. And people don't like to think of themselves as addicts because they're eating a sugar, salt, and oil-rich diet. But the reality is when they try to stop it, it's very difficult. And that's why today 2/3 of people are overweight or obese. The majority of people are developing these chronic degenerative diseases, and people are dying and becoming debilitated, which was maybe even a bigger issue, years before they pass. Life expectancy up until recently had continued to increase. The last few years, it's actually starting to decrease. And even perhaps more important or urgent to people than life expectancy, that is how long they're going to live on average, is healthy life expectancy, how well they're going to live when they're alive. The reality is 9.6 years of debility is average now. So people are not living a good life and then having a good death where they go to bed and don't wake up. They're spending years or decades unable to talk or move, lying in nursing home beds, waiting for people to come and change their diaper because they've had strokes or heart attacks or preventable debilitating illnesses. And that's what we're interested in helping our patients prevent. We know they're not going to live forever. Look, you have 109 billion modern humans that have been born on the planet. There's about 7.7 billion of us alive today, but we only have good documentation of 5 people living past 117. You're not going to live forever. You have a 1 in 20 billion chance of living past 117 currently. So you're not living forever, but what you don't want to do is give up what could be the richest, most valuable years of your life, the last 10 or 20 years of your life. Give them up essentially because of short-term pleasure-seeking, self-indulgent behavior that leads you into becoming debilitated unnecessarily. So we want people to live their full life potential and take advantage of that.